Hey guys! As you've noticed, we have another replacement. This isn't Nathan. He didn't shave his beard. Nathan was supposed to be here today, but Nathan got violently ill, and Dominic is still in Japan. So today it is me and...
Bryan Gillingham.
Yes.
Hi.
So what do you do here, Bryan?
I am the lead animator. I'm also the animation department currently. Sole animator of the studio. Yeah.
Yes, we're hiring. Hiring big time.
Mm-hmm.
So any animators out there, artists, yes, hi, not Nathan. Go onto our website and you will see all of the positions available to help Bryan execute. He does amazing stuff though on his own. So it's insane the amount of work he's done. So. Well, first of all, cheers.
Cheers.
We usually do a cocktail, but Bryan is a Scotch guy, so today we're just doing Scotch. And cheers to Eric.
Scotch. Down in my belly.
Okay, so how did you get your start in animation? Did you start as an artist? Did you start going, I want to be an animator, or was it more nebulous at first?
Actually, I wasn't even thinking about going into like animation or art. Basically, I started when I was in high school. I wanted to become a draftsman or an architect, and I was crap at it. Straight lines and CAD drawings and all that, and wasn't really my thing. And my drafting teacher ended up recognizing that I like to doodle a lot in class. And I still doodle now during meetings and stuff. But, and he was like, you're a good artist. You should go into more of the art realm. And he gave me an opportunity to, instead of working on drafting assignments, during his class, I was assigned a computer, and he allowed me to kind of explore animation.
Oh, that's cool.
It was really cool. Yeah.
Oh, that's
awesome teacher.
Awesome teacher.
Yeah. Yeah, Mr. C, you're awesome.
Oh yes. Captain Crispy sees you're not bearded, so.
Sorry.
But
sorry.
we did have this planned for you.
I can just
Crispy.
hold this up the entire interview like this, if you guys want.
So no one can hear you.
Yeah. So anyways, I spent most of my final year in high school kind of just figuring out animation with an old school program called Animator Pro, which was a sprite-based 2D animation program for like DOS. It was kind of old. So after that, I went straight into animation school. I took no breaks. I was like, I want to be an animator. This is great. This is awesome.
Awesome.
Yeah. At the time, also, like when I was younger, I still play a lot of video games now, but I was pretty much, I grew up in the arcades. I'm an older guy now, and back when I was growing up, in the 80s, the arcade scene was like, it was happening. It was hot. So most of my experiences with gaming were in the arcade realm, and we'd play like some of the older games like Defender and Galaga and Robotron, and then later on, it turned into like Street Fighter 2. And when Street Fighter 2 came out, I was like, oh, man, the art, the animation, the characters are so cool. They're so awesome. Right. There was a big hype that was generated around Street Fighter 2 cabs. The cabinets were up, and people would put up their quarters, and you'd have like Winner Stays On, and it was an awesome scene.
And this is right. Bryan actually collects you collect all these games, right?
Yeah.
You have a ton of arcade games at home.
Yeah. So if my wife's watching, she's very tolerant, and I love you. So. But I do have. At one point, I had a bunch of machines in our older apartment, but now I'm down to 2 machines and a bunch of original boards, and yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So anyways, but my influences were kind of like based on like the arcade games back in the day, and then of course progressing to consoles and all that. So after high school, I didn't even think I was going to be a game animator.
You were thinking of more like film, traditional.
I was actually thinking about TV.
Oh, okay.
At the time, Reboot was like the top notch, right? It was like 3D was still at its infancy, and people in my school were all like, yeah, Reboot is the place to work on.
Right.
And I'm from Vancouver, Canada, and Reboot was made up there at Mainframe, which is now called Rainmaker. So anyways, that's where I set my sights, and worked hard on during school, got my demo reel started. As soon as I finished school and my demo reel was complete, I started passing it out to a bunch of studios, including Mainframe, which they turned me down. But I ended up landing an interview with a company called Radical Entertainment. And that was my start. They liked me, they saw potential in my work, in my demo reel, and they took a chance on me. My first game title was in 1999. It was a hockey game.
Of course. How Canadian of you.
Right? Which was perfect. Oh, it was so great. Everyone on the team watched hockey. And this was back in the day where kind of things were a little bit loose in the studio. So everyone had like a TV on their desk, like a real tube TV back in the day.
Right. Now it's just everyone watches them on their computer
on
monitors.
their computer streams and stuff. But when we would get the hockey games, that were on during the day. And so while we were working on the game, we were watching hockey at the same time, and there was a really good camaraderie of the team that we were all kind of into the sport and into the game that we were making. Unfortunately, that game got canceled because it was for EA's competitor at the time. It was Fox, and Fox was doing this Fox hockey game called Championship Hockey, and Fox ended up pulling out of the sports game realm altogether. Like they canceled all their games, and so then we ended up moving on to another game, which was more action character based. But pretty much like my start was, going into drafting. Didn't really think I was going to become an animator. Becoming an animator in a game studio that, if I look back in hindsight now, it's perfect, right? Like I'm a gamer. I was a big game player from back in the day.
It was meant to be.
It's kind of meant to be. Like the universe sort of corrected my.
You're making stupid decisions.
Yeah,
go this way.
Exactly.
So what are some of the other games that you've after leaving that company? Where did you end up, and what are some of your favorite games you've worked on too?
So that was kind of a hard.
Twice fried rice.
What's up, fried rice? Twice fried rice is great too. I kind of thought about this, and I would say that my favorite. Well, actually, some of the games that I worked on first. So I worked on the Incredible Hulk, or the Hulk movie game, and then a bit of the Incredible Hulk or Hulk Ultimate Destruction, which everyone is making. Yeah,
Eric's freaking out off camera.
Yeah,
he's like so excited.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I don't think
I did a ton of animation concepts for that, like steel fists, shield. Yeah.
I don't think I've ever seen Eric just exhibit as much emotion as he did right here over the Hulk.
Yeah. It's funny. There's certain, and I'll get to this later. There are a couple instances where, we would develop something on a game on a license that it would just be an idea that we throw together, and sometimes it's maybe the idea was already done in, say, the comic books, but sometimes we're not even getting that reference, and we'll come up with something and show our clients, and they'd be, oh, that's great, and then later on, maybe in a year, or like when a movie is produced, we see that stuff in the movie.
They're
and we're
taking your stuff.
That was our idea. That was awesome. But yeah, so the Hulk the Hulk games were great. I got to work on those. I worked on a Spider-Man game called Friend or Foe. That was kind of more of a family-oriented title. I worked on. I ended up moving down to California from Canada, basically about 4 or 5 years after working in the industry, and came down to work on Star Wars Episode 3.
Oh, okay.
And it was a kind of a movie license title. That one was a fun one because I got to work with some really great animators, like old school animators, and we got to work on, of course, Star Wars, the license.
Yeah. So. Awesome.
Yeah, And then after that, I moved on to Blizzard, and I got to work on World of Warcraft, the Burning Crusade expansion. I was lead animator on the gameplay team for that, and
Wow.
that was a great time because we were all hooked onto WoW, and so we'd get up in the get into the office. We're working in the morning, lunchtime we'd log into WoW. Start doing some grinding, do some, farming for some items, and then, work during the day on WoW, go home, and then I would
play WoW?
Play WoW. I'd join my guild, and, we'd do some raids. At the time, it was still early on, so we still had the 40-man raids, which were, like, awesome and kind of frustrating at the same time because the coordination and the setup took a lot. It took a lot of work, and the guilds that really were organized were great for kind of just getting us rolling through some of these high-end content, end game content. So yeah, that was actually one of the times in my career that I was hardcore addicted to the game that I was making.
Right. That's awesome.
Yeah. And sometimes it's hard to do that because sometimes you're like, oh, I see the game all the time, and maybe it doesn't really click with your personal preference as a consumer.
Right.
And so but this one was just like, oh, this is amazing. We all got into it.
Yeah, if we had something if we were working on something like Skyrim, that would be my that's one of my favorite games. It's all I play if I have time for it.
Street Fighter.
If it was Ultimate Destruction.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And then so I worked on a bunch of titles after that. Some of them were smaller. I worked on a few mobile games. After leaving Blizzard, I went back to Canada and stayed up there for about 10 years or 9 years. Got to work at different studios, but I joined a small startup at the time called United Front Games, and that was probably one of the high points of my career because we were all like industry veterans, and we had the same mentality of this united front. It wasn't like this kind of top-down hierarchy. It was basically bottom-up hierarchy.
Awesome. The
guys that were higher up in rank were at the bottom of the pyramid, while the guys that were doing the work were at the top, making the decisions and having ownership. Mm-hmm. And that was great. We had a lot of good times there. We ended up making a game called ModNation Racers, which was a kart racing game that had a lot of customization in track building, in kart customization, character customization, some really good editing of meshes and being able to sculpt things out, and put stamped decals to our American viewers. Decals onto.
Do you call them decals?
We call them decals in Canada.
Canada? Oh my gosh, that might be the weirdest differentiation I've heard.
Oh, there's more.
I mean, I've heard more, but I guess I'd never heard decal said before.
Yeah.
Decals.
Decals.
That's fantastic.
Whenever I hear it here, I'm just like, oh yeah, decals.
Decals.
But yeah, that actually, I would say that game was probably my most favorite game to work on because the gameplay team, again, the animation team was small. It was kind of a situation like this where I was primary animator, but with a little bit of help from a couple people. But the gameplay team was made up of designers, programmers, and myself. And we developed some really great stuff for that game. Good emotion out of the characters. It was kind of like one of the times in my industry or in my career that we would go off and just sort of try things out off schedule, off the books.
Right.
We'd just this would be a fun mechanic. Let's just
see where it goes.
Let's build it. And there was this one instance that we had that was really decals.
Decals.
There was this one instance that I wanted to do this sort of Flintstones cart where it was just you pedaling your feet and moving the cart around,
right.
And you're holding it up like this, and we just did it.
Did it?
It was just a fun little thing, but that was one of the times that we've
Well, some good stuff comes out of that, because that's when people are most creative and actually passionate about stuff. Is like, okay, let's try and do something that we actually want to do and have fun with.
Yeah.
So you were talking about some animation terms back there.
Mm-hmm.
So let's move into, what the animation process is.
Sure.
Because it's completely foreign. It wasn't until asking him a bunch of questions before this interview that I even remotely knew what went into it, other than you made things move.
Yeah.
So
it's pretty much what I tell my in-laws.
I just make things move.
I just make characters move.
So when we had Scott Army on, who did the model, we talked about that, and he did that through Resistor. So we have some Resistor stuff to kind of continue that on. So once you get the model of the character from Scott, what happens then?
Right. So the first thing to do is you gotta rig it to like a skeleton, and the skeleton is our main. How do I say? It's the underlining. It's like skeletons in a human. It's your frame, your structure. When you move your arm, it's the thing that keeps all your skin and your meat together. But we attach it to a skeleton, and then we have control rigs on the skeleton. And those control rigs, the way I like to put it is, it's like controlling a puppet if you're a puppet master, or a puppeteer. You have your control cross, or whatever they call it up there, with the strings, and you're pulling all the arms and legs around, and so that's what the kind of the rigging system is like. You're pulling the skeleton to pose them into certain positions and movements. And then from there, once that rigging step is done, we, depending on what kind of animation it is, first we always start with an idle pose, and the idle pose kind of dictates where the animations are going and where it's coming from. Excuse me.
Is that scotch?
Scotch. Down in my belly. So I start on an idle pose, and that you kind of think about how the characters' proportions are like how they're supposed to stand, how they're supposed to act, and that will kind of dictate their posture. And you kind of basically take reference from different types of character. If it's an angry character, if it's a silly character, or it's a childish character, kind of these cues based on what we've developed from concept art and design.
And you work really closely with the lead designer on this stuff, on what they want and how they see the character.
Yeah.
And I remember when Scott was on, someone had asked about sizing, like how you guys decide the scale of each character. Because, we have very different scales, from Sumo, who you guys haven't met yet, but to Resistor, who's on right now, and Ziggy and stuff like that. Like, they're all very, how do you guys decide the scale?
I think most of it comes from the game design. Game designers have kind of an overall idea about how a character is, like what their role is, if they're going to be a heavy character, if they're going to be a small character. In Resistor's case, he's kind of he's a lighter character, lightfoot character. He is supposed to be the disruptor of the crowd. He's the kind of the anarchist, punk and rebellious, and screw the man and all that. He disrupts things. You see him coming, you're like, oh no, I gotta either scatter, or I gotta move, I gotta prepare for this guy, because he's got this big crazy missile on his back. He's gonna kill me with. So the designers kind of come up with that criteria, and it's usually pretty high level. Like, this is a big character. Like, this character's like the Hulk. He'll be kind of more top heavy, and he's a bull kind of character. Or this character is a scout, a speedy kind of character. And that kind of gives the animators sort of a direction in where we go, and how to come up with these moves and these poses. So from the idle pose, then that kind of stems off all the different animations that you would need. Either it's like combat animations, like shooting and attacking, or jumping animations, or even just regular locomotion, which is running and walking, and so once you establish that kind of sets the tone, and that's That's kind of the idea behind an idle. And then in the game, everything goes back to the idle. You do an attack or you do a jump, and when the jump settles, if you're not pressing anything on the controller, usually the character just stands there, and the standing needs to have an idle.
Right.
And it's usually like breathing or looking around or.
Yeah, just what they would do.
Yeah.
Not doing anything.
Yeah, exactly. Not just still like a mannequin.
Right. Some sort of resting pose.
Yeah.
And then so after you do the idle, you establish like the action ones and the jumps and stuff like that. And then where do you go from there? Because you'd mentioned which program is all this done in?
So the animation and modeling at our studio is done in Maya. Maya is a really good tool it's actually my favorite tool for animating. I've used lots of different software packages, like 3D Studio Max, Softimage, which is now no longer exists anymore.
Oh, okay.
No more support. Even back in the day, I used Power Animator, which was kind of an old school version of Maya. But yeah, we do primarily Maya. And Maya's tools for animating is an industry standard, and it's a pretty good system, pretty good software, because it's also very customizable for people who want to get into the scripting element of it and building your own tools and shortcuts. You can create these sort of like one button clicks to help you do a slew of things. And
oh, very cool.
yeah, it helps workflow a lot. So yeah, the authoring package is Maya, and then our game engine right now is Unreal 4.
Oh, okay.
And then so from creating these animations, and these animations are created, you gotta, like, for an animator, you gotta think of things like how the art style is, like what the look of the animation is going to be, the bounciness of the character, the squash and stretch, how fluid the movements are. On top of that, you also think about what the designers want in terms of what specifications of the moves are. So if you're saying like you're doing a punch animation, a designer will most likely give you kind of these frame times, like, oh, the wind up pose needs to be like 4 frames, and then the active pose, the execution poses need to be like 3 frames after that, and then
right.
then like 15 frames of recovery, and then so you have these kind of criterias of how long an animation, how quick and snappy an animation is for the gameplay needs, and then you sort of build your animations based on both the art side of that and then of course the design requirements.
Wow.
And then from that you export the data, the animation data from Maya to get it into a game engine, and in this case it's Unreal. And once you get into Unreal, you script it up in what's called a state machine. And a state machine is just basically, like, to describe it, what we're doing now. We are at a resting state. We're at a sitting state.
Right.
From this state, say my idle is sitting like this.
I don't think they can see you right now, can they?
Yeah.
Can they see us?
They can see. Yeah, we're on the bottom.
Yeah, you're in the corner.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm looking at the wrong monitor.
And then from this resting state, I can do this action, and then come back to my resting state. I can do this action. I can do this action, and so and then I can get up. I can go to other states, and basically it's a way of traversing a bunch of motions based on input, based on whatever state you're in, and that's how you get it kind of working. And in a game context, say you press a button that's assigned to a punch, then I can do a punch from this state, and it's kind of gives you sort of a flow of what animations to play at any given time.
As you can see, we have a couple characters. We were gonna talk to Bryan about how different, like how he comes up with kind of the ideas of what each character will look like, what their unique movements will be. Because as you can see, the Resistor movements and Ziggy, Ziggy's a lot bouncier than Resistor is. We have a question. Do you have a gun recoil?
Yeah, we do. I think there was one of the examples I gave to you guys. We have a Resistor recoil. I think there's also a Ziggy one. Let's see. This one is fire and reload. So for him, this is the gyrojet. It's a kind of more of a pellet dart kind of weight to the firing. So it's not like this high caliber, weapon. We're not. It's not like any kind of like Gatling or crazy bolt action rifle. Shooting more smaller bullets, probably akin to something like a 22, where it's just kind of smaller shots with not much recoil.
So you have to, I keep thinking of it in terms of character, but you also have to kind of come up with movement and personalities for each weapon too, right?
Correct, yeah.
So I'm sure you must have to do a lot of research for stuff like this.
Yes.
Like how things fire and
part of being an animator is also being kind of a researcher of motion.
Right.
You have to be a student of motion and any motion, in not only in organic beings, but also in objects and how they react to gravity, how they react to energy. So yeah, in this case, I would study something like like a MP5, for instance. It's a classic kind of assault submachine gun, and that uses like very smaller caliber bullets, and it's like a rapid fire, so you kind of get kind of that feeling.
Right.
So before I start any animation, and every animator should do this, research and concept your stuff out first, so you kind of know where you're going with the motion, and you try to get to create plausible animation. Things that like seem like even though we're a stylized game and it has kind of an art style to it, you still want to keep in the realm of realistic, like plausible motions.
Right. What was I was going to ask something about this missile.
Yeah.
Oh no, so for someone like Magni, so she has Magni. I don't think we have anything of her yet on here, but Magni has the blade slinger. So it's just blades and stuff. Like, what kind of stuff what did you look at for something like that?
Right. So.
And I imagine that because the cool thing about her gun is that they come back.
Yeah.
So you get to animate all that stuff
yes.
too.
So this is going to totally date me, but back in the 80s, there was this movie called I Come in Peace. Okay. It was a Dolph Lundgren.
Oh yes, Dolph Lundgren, He-Man.
Like, I come in peace, you go in pieces. And he had this weapon that was kind of this like, it was like this decapitating blade that he'd throw off. It's basically like, I don't know if you guys remember like the old flying guillotine kung fu movie, like the Shaw Brothers movie, something like that, where it was just like, he throws it out and it's like, goes in this sort of boomerang sort of thing and ricochets off different objects and walls, and then it goes and like pinpoints the guy's head and cuts it off and then returns to his hand. So like when they gave me the concept of Magni's gun, I was like, oh, this totally reminds me of I Come in Peace.
So did you go watch it again?
So I went and I watched it, and I was like, oh man, this is terrible.
Oh my gosh, your wife must be like, oh no, for research.
Yeah.
The amount of time, the amount of crappy things she has to sit through for your research, I'm sure.
She's the first to point out anything that's cheesy. Like she'll be like, oh, that's so. Like sometimes when I'm working overtime, I like to have something happen, like I'm watching in the background. I'll usually watch like some old reruns of something. I like to watch like sci-fi mostly. Like I'm a big sci-fi nut, and so I'll like watch reruns of Star Trek TNG or Deep Space Nine or Firefly or something like Avatar: Last Airbender. But anyways, whenever I'm watching Star Trek Next Generation, she's like nothing but comments through every episode, and I'm like, just like, oh man, it's like you got to look past the cheesiness of the acting, and like the content is good, the stories are good.
Right. Someone asked, what is the harder thing to animate? So for the character, the weapon, I imagine there's other thing because at ships and stuff too, right? You've got, there's a whole...
Mechanical stuff is probably the easiest. Ships and moving parts on a machine are pretty simple because they don't have much ambiguity. They're straightforward. A gear only moves in one direction, a piston only moves in one direction. It's pretty simple. But I'd say the hardest piece of animation to create are characters that interact with other characters. So wrestling and grappling. And grappling in the traditional sense of grappling, not with a grappling hook, but like grappling when locking a character up and manipulating them around. That's probably the hardest bit because it takes double the time,
right?
And more because you're kind of you have to think about how one character grabs another and how that what character is the aggressor and the weight of both characters and the intricacies of like where they're grabbing and holding on to and if a guy picks them up and weight and the dangly arms and the flailing and all that.
You have cause and effect.
And we've got to one of the problems with grappling animations or wrestling animations is you have to try to avoid clipping between through characters, and clipping is when one character kind of intersects another in their geometry.
Okay.
In animation, it's not like, when I put this squirrel down, squirrel hits the table and it doesn't pass through the table. There isn't anything that restricts you from that. So in animation, you'll have characters kind of merging, and if you're not paying attention.
You have to make sure you're creating the barriers within.
The barriers are, it's more imaginary. It's more about creating points to lock onto. So if I have an arm that's going to lock onto a shoulder,
right.
I create what's called a constraint system that allows me to snap the arm to this shoulder, and then when I move the shoulder, the arm will move with it.
Oh.
And you're kind of so you get this illusion that there's a solid object
right.
there, but you're basically manipulating it by moving this shoulder rather than the arm.
The arm itself.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
So it's a little tricky, 3D animation thing. Yeah, I get that sometimes.
Really?
Sheldon, yeah. It's the skinniness.
I didn't see it. I didn't see it.
Yeah. Some people
right.
say that I also look like Mark Anthony too.
Mark Anthony. Oh, the singer?
The singer, yeah.
Like Jennifer
when
Lopez
my hair is longer and wearing collared shirt. I don't know any Mark Anthony songs, so I'm not going to sing to you.
I don't either. And then Captain Crispy, not dolphins. Dolph Lundgren. I've been trying to figure out where you got dolphins from.
Dolphins.
I'm like, never liked dolphins. I was so mad. Dolph Lundgren. Look him up. He-Man.
Yeah. During the days like the 80s where there was action movie after action movie of all these these action movie stars.
And what's really funny to me is that the only people that ever mention Dolph Lundgren, I've noticed this, are Canadians.
What?
You guys must have had a big Dolph Lundgren
I'm sure there's a Canadian fan base out there for Dolph Lundgren.
Dolph Lundgren was big in Canada. That's my only assumption, because anytime someone mentions Dolph Lundgren, it's a Canadian. Oh, yep, the Russian boxer in Rocky. Yeah, yep. Dolph Lundgren. Dolphin. I'm going to call him Dolphin now.
What was his name? And it was a Drago. Yeah. Drago. Oh, he was such a badass in that movie.
So He-Man in the live action ones, not the cartoon.
With the key. Remember Masters of the Universe. Yeah. They had the key that played music and stuff. It was cool. And had little spinning forks.
I'm gonna call it Humphrey. All right, Captain Crispy. So I see this. The character development stuff is super interesting to me. So where do you look for the difference between Ziggy's run? I can only assume because he's gaseous, that kind of is where the bounciness is coming from.
Yeah.
But from resistor run, where are you going to for the kind of more physical movements?
Right.
Is it more movies, like you were talking? Is it more, do you find yourself watching people and going, oh, I'm going to put you into an animation?
I'm totally creeping on people in the office, oh, okay, that's reference. No.
Hey, I do it as a writer.
So. Yeah, that's what you got to do. You got to get reference, and people watching is part of it too. Mm-hmm. I definitely check out how people move, and some people move differently based on their height and their weight and their
right.
Even just their mood. Their mood changes the way you move as well, and the way you posture. But let's talk about Ziggy. For instance, so Ziggy, he's a gaseous character. He fills up this suit. From what we see, that's somewhat I don't want to say organic because he's a gas, but his character comes from his head. You know, his head is basically what he is in essence, in his basic form. The idea that I took from this, and I basically looked at old school. Thank you.
and this is like early, like
this is early, yeah.
Because now he's even wispier. Like
yeah.
These are very early animations, but when we finally get to gameplay, you'll see he's fucking awesome. Like this looks amazing, and now he's even more amazing. So.
Yeah, I was taking reference or ideas on his basically the base of his movements. I was taking reference from Earthworm Jim.
Oh, okay.
Earthworm
I can see it.
Yeah, he's like, Earthworm. He embodies a suit. His head is kind of where he is, and the movements are based on that. Like, so I don't know if I supplied you guys with a jump. Excuse me.
Do we have a Ziggy jump?
No, that's the
although
shooting.
I do like, we go back to the one of them shooting where his head goes in.
This was an idea I had, and it's kind of another one of those instances where I just like I had this crazy idea. I just want to try it out. I wanted to use his gun as sort of this propulsion system of where he goes into it with his wispy gaseousness and produces this high velocity bullet.
That's awesome.
And then, of course, it respawns from his suit.
He's just feeding himself into the gun. I love it.
And because he's a sniper class, he doesn't have to worry about reloading. It's all bolt action, so it's like shot, reload, shot, reload.
Right.
So we don't have to worry about filling up the canister or filling up the magazine and shooting it off that way. But yeah, this is just kind of a fun little idea I had with using his character and trying to incorporate it into a firing.
The
shooting.
gameplay itself. Well, Ziggy, there's a lot of instances of Ziggy with that because we have also all of his kind of like emoji things. Like his head is very. We use it for a lot of it, like emotions. There's the heart one. We don't have any of them in here, but there's some cool stuff. And from what I heard, we're actually going to be able to do them during gameplay.
Correct.
Like you can actually access and
so his head kind of shapes into a heart or into a smiley or it kind of depends on what emote you're firing off.
Going for.
Yeah.
We did have a question. What is the strangest thing you've ever had to animate? Other than this, right? I mean, this looks pretty strange to me, but
right. Oh gosh, that's a great question. Strangest.
That gives headshot a new meaning. Yes, it does.
Yeah, the strangest thing. Let's see. Like I've worked on games where. So one of my last big titles was Gears of War 4, and I got to work on what's called the Snatcher creature, and the Snatcher. He kind of has these very stilted legs and. He's got this big belly and this big mouth with a crazy tongue. And at some point in the game, you get eaten up by this character, but not through his mouth.
Through his stomach?
Through his stomach. His stomach opens up, and tentacles come out, and they grab you, and they pull you in, and then you're locked in. You're inside the Snatcher until someone shoots the Snatcher to let you go.
So you had to animate that?
Yeah, that was the grossest.
And so what kind of research were you doing for that?
All anime porn.
Yeah, that would probably do it.
No, previous to that, I actually worked on a mobile game that had squid. And squid, tentacles, or the way they move are very interesting. Like they have kind of they curl out, they're sticky, they have this sort of they make really nice shapes that kind of curl around things, and that's how they grab onto stuff. So I kind of thought about that in moving the tentacles, and on top of that, he the way he moves, he's a climber. He jumps from precipice to precipice, and he's kind of this nimble. Hoppy kind of guy, so you kind of when I was animating it, you think about the way the stilted legs work and how they spring them up, and they compress and they push his body transferring that energy from his leg muscles to push him up, you know, into the air, and you get some really cool pouncing moments in the game for him doing that.
Very cool.
Have you ever animated a beard or a salmon?
Oh.
Yes, I animated a salmon.
Oh.
I animated many fish in this game that I worked on for a mobile title. It was called Alfie the Squid, and you played as a squid who was trying to get back to his mom, who got separated from his mom at an early age, and you go through different parts of the ocean, coral reef. It just made Crispy's day. And
we're working on them, getting salmon in the game.
Salmon character, Crispy, all for you. And yeah, so I got to work on animating salmon, yellowfin tuna, bonita, like all these different fish. I learned a bunch about fish and squid and
how they move,
octopi and how they move.
So he's a pro. If anyone can animate a salmon character, it's going to be Bryan. He's already done all the research. There it is.
There it is. There we go. Welcome to the stream.
Welcome to the salmon stream. I'm just going to start calling it that.
But as for beard, yeah, some characters you have a beard and they gotta have a little bit of secondary motion on that beard, especially if you have a beard like some of the guys in our studio.
Right. I imagine, yeah. Well, someone asked like, what's the hardest thing to animate? I mean, is there stuff like that gets really tedious?
Yeah, I mean, there are some stuff that pertain to animation, and. Oh, thank you.
Look, you turned it. You don't have a beard, and
I don't have a beard, and you worship me. Oh, that's awesome! This hairless wonder right here. Yeah, like there are some gameplay animations that are just kind of, they're not the most glamorous. They're more for function. You have like things like transitions that are they end up being a little bit more tedious. And a transition is something that. Say I'm in a standing idle and then I start walking. One classic transition is to lean the character and take his first step into a walk cycle, and that leaning and taking the first step is what's called a transition. And there's a slew of that in the game because in some cases you don't want to just rely on the computer to give you a translation from one animation to another. What's called blending. You don't want to really rely on blending too much because sometimes blending gives you odd results, or it doesn't pertain to the art style or the animation style, or the motion doesn't feel organic or fluid. So sometimes you have to actually create these transitions, and transitions can be pretty tedious and time consuming because you can create a lot of them.
So you're the one doing that's not a coding thing. That's an animation thing.
Yeah.
So like when Dom and I were playing Tomb Raider. A few months ago on Twitch, and her hair kept going for really long. Like there was this bug where her hair would just like blow behind her for for infinity.
Right.
You couldn't see anything. Is that an animation thing, or is that a coding thing?
That's kind of. I think that's more of a tech art thing, a technical art thing. That's what's called dynamics, and we put dynamic simulations on certain dangly things like ponytails and. If your character like Resistor has chains and he's got this little side pack of what's it called, missiles or rockets.
Mike was watching that stream, so he knows exactly.
That's a physics
Mike.
bug. Yeah. So yeah, dynamic simulation, also called physics, is something that you put on these sort of dangly bits that are what animators consider for free. We don't have to animate that. That's something that happens based on where the character's moving, and it's kind of like applying physics to an object to have it fall and dangle and move while your character's moving. So yeah, you must have found a bug where it just went out of whack.
Mike was watching it. It was like it kept getting in the way. Like it looked like this giant lasso rope that would just dangle behind her and would stretch through the caves, and you couldn't.
The hair is physics based in Tomb Raider, so.
Yeah. Yeah, that happens. And that's the thing with you don't always want to rely on the computer to give you these certain things because you can have these bugs that come up. When it's handled in animation content, it's more solid. You get more control over it, and the margin of error is less.
Right. Interesting. So let's see. We got about 15 minutes left here. What would you like? Another splash of
Ooh, yes.
scotch?
Just a nip.
Oh, here comes
Spread it
the
around.
mystery hand. Oh, don't move it away.
I got an interview to give later on, so I'm going to be
Here.
going to be in the right place for it.
See, don't you want to come work at Blind Squirrel Games, guys?
Yeah, we have fun.
We do have
We
fun.
get drunk.
Everyone's always jealous. This is the only reason why they Brad, the mystery hand. There goes our CEO. Yeah, everyone wants to come on the Twitch stream because this is the hour you get to drink during the day. We had one of our producers say, "Can I come by and just bomb the thing?"
Yeah.
Like, no, only if you
Come on
agree
by,
to come in.
You got to show
and
yourself.
do the interview.
Yeah.
I've had some people say they didn't want to come on camera. It's like, then you don't get the drink.
Yep, exactly.
So you get to pick. See, need a green sleeve on the mystery hand so it truly floats. Next time. So what advice would you give to someone wanting to get into animation?
Right. The first thing is, you be a student of motion, and I say that by looking at references, like high quality movies, the
Like
stuff.
He-Man.
Yeah, like He-Man and
pictures.
and Icon Piece. Oh, here we go. Yes, that's what I'm talking about. Little mountain background. It's bringing me back to my home.
Oh yeah, this was Brian's other request.
Yeah. So where I'm from in Vancouver, we're just surrounded by forestry and mountains, and it's great. Like we used to go snowboarding a lot and hiking, and I do kind of miss that of British Columbia. It's such a beautiful place. There's some beautiful places down here, but it's a little bit more brown than green.
Yeah, most of the time. Although lately the rain's brought in a lot of green.
That's true, and flowers.
Yeah.
Like tons
Oh
of
yeah,
flowers.
the flowers are insane right now.
Yeah, deep thoughts.
Deep thoughts.
Yeah.
Deep thoughts with Brian and me.
But yeah, my advice is the first thing is animation is about creating motion and character personality. And I always say that animators are kind of like actors, where they have to get into a role, they have to figure out what that character's role and motivation, for lack of a better term, is. So we're like actors, except we don't have to go on stage or on camera and produce those type of performances, but we create the performance out of our characters to make them believable, to make you connect with them. Some people, so for an example is you look at games like God of War and Assassin's Creed, and you get into the mindset of that character, and not only from what the tasks they need to do in the game, but also what they look like and how they move and act.
Right.
The way Kratos looks and speaks, kind of dictates how he moves. And so, animators getting into this need to, kind of think about the performance and the acting of the character, what's inside their heart and their mind, and how they create how they move and react to things, and because everyone moves differently. The way you walk is different from the way I walk.
Right.
And that's not just from age or gender or height or weight. It's just there's also upbringing and background and how you were taught to walk and how you've learned how to walk, and and honed it. So animators starting out is the first thing you got to do is just look at motion and dissect characters and dissect movies. Not only watching a movie for story, but also looking at how the characters act and pose and change.
Right. Well, someone just asked a question that I was going to ask also, that do you ever act out motion and film yourself to get a reference?
Yes.
Do you have a mirror next? I just remember always watching documentaries of Disney animators, because, and in film animation you have a lot more facial recognition. It's less so in games, I find.
Yeah.
But they would always have a mirror on their desk so that they could see how their mouth was moving. Or
when I do facial animation bits, then you have to have a mirror in front of you, because you have to be able to especially when you're talking to dialogue, you have to make the motions yourself. I got to work on 2 TV. I actually did get into TV at one point in my career as well. I got to work on the Nickelodeon Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles show.
Awesome.
I produced, helped work on a few of those episodes, and I've also worked on Blaze, the Monster Machines.
Okay, I know what that
kind
is.
of kid show.
Yep.
Yeah, my daughter
I used
watches
to be a nanny, so I've seen
Yeah, and those characters, they, you know, there's a lot of talking, there's a lot of dialogue, so you have to kind of look at yourself and make the phonemes out of your mouth. You know, like what does a W look like? What do you know?
Yes, we're at the Rainforest Cafe. Where's that?
That
Where's
looks
that
more like
good?
Vancouver. It rains a lot there.
I really want a Rainforest Cafe now. I don't want an actual forest. I want a fake forest with screaming children, Eric.
There we go. Summertime. But yeah, I do act out stuff in front of a camera, record myself. When I was on episode 3, Star Wars episode 3, I got to work on a character called Mace Windu, who was portrayed by Samuel L. Jackson.
Yes.
Samuel L. Jackson! And like,
So you had to get his movements down.
had to get his
for
movements
mouth?
down, and I also had to like act out some of his attacks. His style was kind of more Bushido, samurai, attacking, you know, swipes and sword swings and stuff. So we ended up getting a prop, an actual like wooden katana, and got out into the parking lot and recorded all these different kind of slashes and attacks and stabs and all that, and then I take that reference and the timing and put it into the animation.
That's awesome. We should do more of that here.
Yeah. Oh yeah, I will. Yeah, definitely.
We should do I suggested we should do like a Nerf gun war soon. So for the office. And we can say it's for Bryan's research.
Yep.
It's necessary.
Especially getting shot
For
in
the game.
face.
Goggles, everyone wear goggles.
But yeah, and the other advice I would give to animators is, you know, be prepared to put in some long hours. Like, you know, I started off, I had to work a lot to get to, you know, where I am, and there is no real shortcut to the work. You need to really put in the time and practice. Even now, as a you know, veteran animator in the industry, I still have to go back and, you know, on my spare time and animate, which I don't do as much as I would like. But you know, you got to do the practice on your own. You can't just be, you know, kind of doing it for work. Because if you just concentrate on the work tasks that you have, you kind of get into tunnel vision mode where you're just kind of always doing cycles of runs
and the same thing.
And the same thing over and over.
You're not challenging yourself. Really.
Exactly.
Or discovering new stuff. I think that's just good advice for anything, like people constantly finding the newer thing, because there's always, you know, someone else that's out there doing something newer and better.
Exactly.
So staying on top of that kind of stuff in any field gives
practice.
you more of an edge.
Yeah.
So
And like, to quote one of my favorite quotes from Chuck Jones, everyone has 1,000 bad drawings in them. Once you get them out, then you start doing the good ones. Something like that, paraphrasing, but yeah, that's kind of the same with animation. You know, the more animation you do, the more you understand, the more research you do on the animation and the motions, the more you get the kinetics of how people move.
Right. So, well, you're giving advice, and you just quoted Chuck Jones. I was going to ask what the best advice you've been given is, or any mentor has given you any of the stuff that's gotten you to here.
All right. I worked with this guy. He wasn't necessarily my mentor, but he was a really cool dude. And he's a big name in the animation industry. His name is Jamal Bradley. He gave me a really good, solid advice. Actually, he bought me a really sweet book for my 30th birthday called The Illusion of Life, which is a kind of like an animation Bible, which was built under the premise of the 9 Old Men of Disney, where they, you know, kind of break down how to create character and how they created characters for the different classic movies. Anyways, in the insert or the inset of the book, he wrote down, you know, happy birthday. Always keep pushing forward, always. And that's been kind of a motto for me for the past 15 years of my career. You always got to push forward. You always got to seek new lights and new civilizations, new frontiers. Boldly go. where no animator's gone before. But like, you have to expand your horizons and keep pushing to the hardest degree. Like, if you haven't animated something before, try it out. If you learn, keep up to date with what's the new technologies, the new tools, the new processes. The idea is that you just got to keep being fresh and not get into a stagnant state where you're not producing the most highest quality stuff, or you're not growing.
Right.
Growth is the biggest thing for every artist, and I think that is a constant until we die.
Right. Well, yeah, it's a tough job to get into. Like, there's a lot of competition.
Right.
There's a lot of talented people, and there's a lot of people that want to be artists.
Yeah.
So it's always the people that have that edge, that are more innovative and that are staying up to date, that are the ones that are staying employed.
Correct.
What's some of the, I was gonna say worst advice, but what would you caution people against? Because there's a lot of paths that people take to get to the video game industry, and sometimes they're a waste of time.
Right.
Is there anything that you've seen people do that it's just like doesn't end up working in their favor, or isn't going to really result in much?
For an animator, the demo reel is your primary source of gaining recognition and attention. Your demo reel is like the king. It doesn't matter if you're self-taught. It doesn't matter if you went to high-end schools. That helps, but really the proof is in the pudding. You need to show that you can create the work. And a lot of times I see these demo reels that some people put in questionable quality stuff, beside their high quality stuff. The idea is that you want to put your best foot forward. You always want to show your best stuff. If something is subpar to your best stuff, get rid of it. Don't show it.
Right.
That's kind of one of the big things when it comes to demo reels. I got to mentor at a school up in Vancouver called Think Tank, and I got to go in for a day a week for a couple hours and just critique people on their demo reels and their animations, and that was one of the things of advice I'd give them. Just don't show any weak stuff. It's got to be all strong.
Right.
And then if comes time that you're trying to get into the industry as an animator and nothing's clicking, you're not able to get land a job, then pivot, look into something else. Tech animation or tech art is a big role in every industry, in every 3D animation industry. Learn to rig, learn to make tools. If you're not clicking with animation, a good backup would be
right.
technical animation or technical art.
And what does a technical artist job entail?
Basically the first step of getting these characters up and running. They do the rigging, they create the skeletons,
okay.
They create tools for efficiency of building these characters and getting them quickly into the game. Basically stay flexible, but also look into paths that there is a big need for. Like, tech artists are hard to come by these days. Good ones as well. That is not the most glamorous job. But is a very necessary job. It's the foundation that all animators work off, and for me, it's a dire need. Like I grew in the industry knowing kind of multiple disciplines, because back then you had to learn a lot of different disciplines to get by. Now everything's specialized. An animator is an animator, a tech artist a tech artist. But
right.
Back in the day, you would do rigging and you do modeling, you do animating. So stay flexible. If you're not working, if animation's not working out, look at other areas that are involved with animation.
Let's see. The more you can do, the more likely you are hired. Most teams are small and need flexibility in the team members.
Right.
Yes.
That's correct.
This is true.
For studios like us, for sure. You're not going to get that kind of you're not going to be able to wear the multiple hats in bigger studios, like if you worked for someone like EA or Microsoft, because those studios, their teams are huge, their budgets are huge.
Right.
So they want people that are focused on the one specific task that they can do. I remember talking to a friend of mine who was an animator on FIFA, and he said that he spent 3 months animating, cleaning up feet. That was his job.
Sounds really
cleaning up foot mocap.
Sounds really thrilling. Oh my god. Well, that's like my mom. She used to be a scenic artist, and
Yeah.
so she would always talk about like she did the sets for Scream, the movie Scream, and when we watched it, I couldn't watch it with her because she would pause it every 5 seconds and be like, "Look, there's my toilets," and because they bring in brand new toilets,
Yeah.
and she's like, "I spent a month like painting these to look like they were 20 years old, and those are my bushes. The bushes were too brown, so I painted them green." Like these minute details. I'm like, your job sounds super fun.
Yeah. I'm the toilet creator.
Yeah, like I painted these toilets.
Nice.
So, like, brown rings around them. Lovely. This mod learned some things for sure. There you go. Moving on up. Oh, we're running.
No
Eric
problem,
is,
Mike. You're
Eric,
welcome.
This has been super informative. Thanks, Bryan. You're welcome. We try. So next, actually, you know what? I don't know what we're doing next week. I'll be looking. We're doing something. So I need to look at the schedule and see who we have on the docket. Dom will be back next week.
Yay.
So
Get his beard back for all you beard
he'll
fans.
have his beard back and the clipping microphone back from his cackling.
Yeah.
So Eric's not too happy about Dom being back. Well, thank you guys for tuning in. And thank you, Bryan,
Thank you
for coming on.
Yeah, it was a pleasure, and thank you for the scotch.
See, this is how we bribe people with
Yeah.
booze to teach you things. All right, guys, we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.